Okay, so right now I'm looking at your CSQ 4 for unemployment. Okay, I'm going to do the question analysis for the higher order question. So we're looking at the 8 and 10 mark questions here. All right, so okay, so let's look at the 8 mark question first. So using relevant case materials, discuss the considerations of a government. All right, discuss consideration of a government in decision to address unemployment. All right, so what we are looking out here for is what are the various consideration. All right, so this has got to be linked to your decision making framework. All right, and this type of questions are very popular questions. Okay, so when we talk about this question here, all right, we need you to refer to your decision making framework lah. All right, so what are the considerations? Okay, so if you recall how your decision making framework work, all right, basically depending on which role you are, the economic agent, are you consumer, producer, or government? So in this case here, we are government. So our objective here basically is to try to address unemployment. So in coming up with policies, okay, you know that this question has got to be linked to your policy question, right? Okay, so in coming out with policies, what are the various aspects, okay, that your government will need to consider? All right, and if you look at your decision-making framework, okay, which aspects do we look at? We look at the inner circle here. All right, you can see, okay, we have 5 different areas to consider. All right, so this is an 8-mark question. Do I need all 5? Of course, the answer is no lah. Because this is a 8-mark question, but of which 6 mark is for your level marking. Okay, are you level 1 or level 2? And of course, 2 mark is for evaluation, your conclusion. Okay, I don't know why there's always this switching, toggling around. Okay, I think there's something wrong. But never mind. Okay, so as we look at this, okay, you need to look at the various aspects. So roughly about 2 to 3 of these points, well explained. All right, should be sufficient for you to score. If you do it considerably well, okay, 6 marks. And of course, 2 marks for your conclusion. All right, so the various consideration. All right, I think most students, what you will tend to do, you will look at cost benefit. I think when we make a decision, we always, okay, consider what is the cost of my decision, what is the benefit of my decision. All right, but that is, of course, not just cost benefit alone. You could also look at the constraints. All right, are we subjected to certain constraints that could limit the use of certain policy, perhaps? All right, and I think what is also very important here would be information. Okay, in trying to address a particular problem, we need to, of course, establish what is the root cause of your problem. So information, all right, is necessary and also an important consideration that we want to undertake. Lastly, of course, we also want to look at perspective. Okay, because as we undertake certain policies, it could have effects on your consumers as well as your producers. All right, so we want to also consider how, okay, from the various perspectives, how the policies can impact them. Okay, and then see how we can try to hopefully mitigate such effects. Okay, so I think I have briefly shared with you quite a number of various points. So points such as, okay, so if let's say you want to use policy, all right, government want to use policy. Okay, what is the benefit? I think most importantly, why do we seek to address unemployment? Okay, as we seek to address unemployment, what it does here is basically it brings about an improvement in our standard of living. All right, the purpose of achieving your macro goals is so that there can be an improvement in your standard of living. All right, so I think that is one of the benefit lah. All right, you can also look at through addressing this unemployment, one less problem to be concerned with. It can also help to improve outlook of your economy and bring about considerable economic benefits for your economy, such as economic growth, etc. All right, so these are the possible benefits that you could perhaps look at if you want to look at the benefit aspect. If you want to look at the cost aspect, okay, what are the costs involved, okay, of undertaking policies? All right, I think definitely there will be a cost. I mean, from the government's perspective, if you want to use your fiscal policy, your fiscal budget, okay, it will have impact on your fiscal budget, okay, and of course, cost in terms of allocation of your scarce resources. How do you go about allocating your resources? Because as you try to undertake your policies, all right, you might have to forego certain resources. Sorry, certain expenditure in different areas. All right, so this could involve the allocation or reallocation of resources, which you can very well tie in with the constraint. All right, because since you have this cost incurred, all right, so if you want to use policy, you will be constrained by the budget lah. Government, how much money you have, all right, and of course the whole central economic problem, the constraint of your limited resources. All right, so the scarcity of resources here will be an issue that you want to consider if you look at constraint as an aspect. Okay, so just now I mentioned about information. So information, all right, so you want to find out what's the root cause of your unemployment. Because knowing the root cause, you can then determine what kind of policy will then be appropriate for you to use so that you can achieve, at least tackle this root cause to bring about a reduction in your unemployment. Okay, information, you also want to perhaps look at the extent of your unemployment. All right, is it a very severe unemployment issue, or is this unemployment issue something that perhaps might not be so might not require as much attention, at least at this point in time, because there could be other macro issues that could be of larger concern. All right, because as you know, we cannot achieve all four macro goals at the same time. So sometimes you might have to, you know, prioritize your goal, and therefore your policies will then be determined by the prioritization of your goal lah. All right, we'll talk more about this in class, okay, during tutorial. Uh, and as I mentioned, perspective lah. Okay, because as I mentioned earlier, your policies that are undertaken, it can have impact on various stakeholders. All right, such as your firms, your employers. How will this policy impact upon them? All right, as well as your unemployed lah. All right, so that's how we go about addressing this particular question. All right, and I hope you will be able to do this. Now I move on to the 10-mark question. Explain why EU has decided to implement a different policy from that of UK and French government to resolve your unemployment. Consider which approach likely to be more effective. So you need to see what kind of policy EU is using and what kind of policy UK and France they are using in order to tackle unemployment. So between these various countries, to then come up with a conclusion as to which one is likely to be more effective. So let us look at extract 6, and for extract 6, let us see what kind of policy that they are actually using. So if you look clearly at extract 6, they mention something known as protection. Okay, and this protection, they talk about anti-dumping and anti-subsidy duties. All right, so what kind of policy is this? This is basically known as protectionism. Okay, you will be learning more of this under international trade plus globalization sometime in term 3. Okay, you'll be learning more of this sometime in term 3. So what exactly is it? Okay, so it involves you putting tariffs on imports, okay, import quota or other government regulation. Okay, and this is usually done to try to protect your domestic producers. Okay, so how does this then help to resolve unemployment? Okay, so this is a trade policy. So I believe you have heard about US, China, and their trade tensions. Okay, so if let's say US impose trade tariff on China, so Chinese exports to US. So US import these goods. So the imports that US buy from China right now will become slightly more expensive. So this means that imported goods from China become relatively more expensive than your domestic goods. All right, because that's what a tariff does lah. And what happens here is your US citizens, okay, will then switch to consume domestically produced goods. Okay, I know I'm talking about US, China, etc., but okay, let's come back to this context. This context here is of course using EU lah. So perhaps I should use EU to help you to understand this better. So EU, okay, once let's say Germany, okay, recent conversion. So Germany, let's say Germany, they decide to impose these tariffs. Okay, so what happens here is that imports that come into Germany right now will become relatively more expensive because tariffs are like taxes. All right, this will add on to the price. So previously, these imports could be relatively cheaper compared to domestically produced goods. But right now, with the tariffs imposed on these imported goods, your imported goods become relatively more expensive now. So what happens is your German consumers might choose to consume domestically produced goods instead. All right, because right now price of import become relatively more expensive. And what this means is that your locally produced goods and services, the demand for it will increase. All right, and since labor here is a derived demand of your production, when production increase, the demand for labor will increase, and this will help to resolve the problem of unemployment here. Okay, so this is the policy that EU is using. All right, let us see how this contrasts to the policy that is being used in UK and France. Okay, I know. Okay, UK, I did not screenshot the extract, but UK, if you look at extract, if I'm not wrong, extract 5. Okay, extract 5 mentions about UK and what they do, they have more apprenticeship. So apprenticeship, like your vocational training, okay, training on your technical skills. So that is one form of what we have discussed previously before in class, your supply side policy. Okay, because there could be a mismatch, okay, or there could be a need, increasing demand for technical skills. So this type of apprenticeship vocational training can help to satisfy and close the mismatch of the skills lah, the gap in terms of the skills. All right, what France is doing, okay, France, okay, what they have done is they are trying to do a reform, a labor market reform. So moving away from this 35-hour work week. So prior to that, okay, back in the 1990s, France had this 35-hour work week in place lah. So that means that if you that means that the maximum working hour, okay, in France per week is 35 hours. So anyone who wants your employees to work more than 35 hours, you have to pay between 10 and 50% extra per hour. So your OT pay lah. Okay. So once this is actually abolished, or as long as this reform is actually successful, what this will do is it will help to allow the renegotiation of longer working hour and lower overtime pay. So the whole idea here is to try to lower COP lah. Okay, is to lower cost of production, increase competitiveness, okay, of France. Okay, because down here they have mentioned about how because of your 35-hour week, there's an escalation of your labor costs. All right, and French companies struggling to compete in global market because of higher labor costs, your France won't be as attractive for investment. Because if you want to build your factory, okay, in France, you have a higher workers, and if you hire workers with such strong, such strict working hours, etc., okay, you actually feel that your cost of production will have to increase lah. Because if you want them to work OT, overtime, etc., you have to pay them much more compared to another country which is more lax or don't even have such restriction. All right, so therefore, this is a supply side policy as well. And this is one that is trying to cut back on your regulations in terms of the labor market. So this hopefully can help France to actually abolish your short week. Okay, and on a more level footing with your foreign competitor. So you can see the difference in the type of policy. EU, what they did was they did a trade policy, a protectionist measure. So you can see how that protectionist measure helped to increase the demand for labor in EU. You can see how UK and France, how they actually adopted a different approach. Both sides actually used a supply side policy. All right, for France, they try to cut back in terms of labor costs, because labor costs have been escalating and has been increasing, and is one of the issue. So that's why hopefully by reducing this COP, this can help to increase the employment of your worker, because when you lower COP, your SRAS will increase and your output will increase, derived demand for labor derived demand, so your demand, this will help to increase your demand for labor, increase employment. So that's the France approach lah. UK, what they did is they try to cut back or try to minimize the gap in terms of the mismatch of skills. So again, that will also help to cut back the unemployment figures. All right, so different countries, different approaches. At the end of the day, which approach likely to be more effective? So how do we then tackle this? But how do I know whether which one is more effective? I think as you can see, why is it that these various countries are using various policy? All right, if you have a cough, if you have a headache, okay, what type of medicines do you take? Your medicine must be addressing your ailment, your illness. All right, so same thing. Your policies must also address your root cause of your problem. So which approach ultimately will be more effective dependent on various factors, one of which will be your root cause. All right, I'll leave the rest for you to actually think on your own, and we will discuss further in class. So that's the end for my question analysis for this particular question. So I hope you are actually able to do this, and let's discuss this in class further.